Welcome. Thank you, everybody. So as Ross mentioned, I'm Lisa Shaymont, and this is Amber Hart. And we are here today to provide market research about doing business with the United States Air Force. If you've seen us before, it's because we've been with Washington Technology as their content partners, and we've done presentations on things like GWAX, DOJ, DHS, Enterprise IT as a Service, just to name a few. So just a quick disclaimer, this is just saying when you get the slides, please don't resell it. But who would you be taking stuff from? We are the Pulse of GovCon. We are a research and advisory firm. We're dedicated to the empowerment of government contractors, and we provide what we call BD 360, meaning that we approach business development from all angles, from policy to proposals. We do a lot of these presentations, like I mentioned before. We also do free lunch and learns. So some upcoming ones that we are going to be discussing are how to market your GSA schedule, federal procurement tools and functionality, and planning for Q4. Everybody always asks, are we going to get the presentation? Are we going to get the presentation? Yes, you're going to get the presentation. We have this.
And then some.
And
so
then
all
some.
those people leaving are going to be sad.
Yes, because we will be providing a pipeline of 5 IT Air Force opportunities. If you use this QR code, it is going to pop up again, and we just want to get to the meat of the presentation, so don't worry. So let's just pull back and provide some context. The Pulse believes a lot in providing, if you want to be cute, context as a service. If you don't want to be cute, it's a history lesson. And it's because we need to understand the agencies that we're working with.
Well, as he said, right, understanding what the language is, how to speak the Air Force's language. And when you walk into the room, you both are saying the same thing.
Exactly. Winston made some really good points about how you need to do your homework in advance of approaching these contracting officers, especially if, from what we heard before, they might be saying no to you. So just to pull back and give you sort of the 10,000-foot view on Air Force. Originally created actually as part of the Army Signal Corps, it became its own branch in 1946. It is the world's largest Air Force with 3 continents, operating 5,000 military aircraft with over 678,000 active civilian reserve and National Guard personnel and airmen. Now, as government contractors, we're always looking for things like org charts within the agencies that we support. We didn't find any traditional org charts. And again, you will get the slides, so you won't be able to see any of this. So you're just going to have to trust me. Part of what we are going to provide on those slides is the links through to all the sources as well. So you will be able to see these bigger. But what we found for Air Force was less of a traditional org chart and more of this pyramid. And what it's really showing is that it's broken down into 2 distinct categories of staff and operations and support. Starting at the top with the secretary, moving into headquarters, then the major components and reserve components, of which there are 11, then the numbered Air Force and centers, wings, groups, and squadrons. Now, the operation spans the 5 core missions that you'll see if you look at their material, right? Air supremacy, global integrated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, rapid global mobility, global strike, command and control. There was a lot of discussion before about locations just across the world. And so what you're going to see here is that the number of active duty bases with the U.S. rose from in 1947 to its peak at 162, but then has steadily declined. And in 2020, there was 59 listed. Now, one of these images down here is this map, and it's massive, and it's not the bases. It's all of the facilities that you're going to find.
Data centers.
The data centers, a little bit of everything. It is from 2009, though. And something just to pull back to on what we provide, all we have is the information as it is made available to the public. So you'll find that some of this is a little outdated, but sometimes it's sort of the best thing that you can get. So if you do go to this website that's on under this image, you'd be able to download actually a poster size of this information.
Hang it behind your desk.
Hang it behind your desk. But from a government contracting perspective, people are always asking us, how does the Air Force buy? And so this is even more than just looking at the different components of the Air Force, but also just about procurement and acquisition specifically. So Air Force actually uses this acquisition process model, also known as APM. This is a framework for acquisition, and it's broken down into different avenues based on what it is that they're acquiring. So the acquisition of service versus defense business system, software acquisition, major capability acquisition, middle tier of acquisition, and urgent capability acquisition all have different components in a framework by which the contracting officers follow. Now, this is really about the central knowledge warehouse for the acquisition professionals. It does things like it establishes standard definitions. We talked about all using the same language. This is the language that they're using to cover most acquisition procedures for services and materials. And this is from 2023. So you will be able to access this larger when you click on the link.
And just a note on that, this is also not just a photo. If you go to acquisition process model for the Air Force, put it into your Google machine, it will pop up, and it is an interactive map that you can click on, play around with, get to know the lingo, so that when you're talking to contracting officials within the Air Force and the acquisition professionals, you can be speaking the language and understand the flow that they are following as well.
In a similar vein, we need to know who is doing the buying. And this is something that we preach to GovCon all the time, which is just because you know a
CIO.
or the program manager or somebody else there, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones responsible for contracting initiatives. So Air Force Acquisition is led by the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Now, before we had also talked about org charts. This one doesn't exist as far as we could find. This is something that we put together based on a culmination of other images and reports and research that we did. But what you can see is that Air Force Acquisition Directorate is essentially led by that assistant secretary, broken down by directorates and program exec officers. Now, this directorate annually manages about a $65 billion plus budget. And they say that there's about 35,000 acquisition professionals. But if you see the breakdown, 100 support acquisition integration directorate, 8,000 support contracting directorate, 25,000 support the acquisition core directorate for civilian, and 9,700 support the military acquisition personnel. The math just ain't math in there. So it's actually more in like the 42,000 type of employees.
But this is the information that the website provides.
That is out there. There's also over 550 acquisition programs, including 75 programs for Information Dominance Directorate and 150 programs for Global Power Directorate. And we're going to talk about those directorates in just a moment. So some of the directorate definitions and relationships, and we're not going to get into each of them, but you will, like I said, get the slides. We wanted to point out these two positions because in the org chart, they are actually, as far as we can see, vacant. So the chief architect and the chief software portions of that directorate. For the chief architect, the mission was to lead technical architectures for the entire air and space portfolio to enable accelerated, agile delivery of integrated warfighter capabilities and support of national security objectives. And it's a portfolio of approximately $70 billion plus in acquisition, research, and development. That's a pretty meaty position to have been sitting vacant.
Kind of a big role.
It's kind of a big role. Same thing with the chief software, which has been vacant, I believe, since 2021. And this is to serve as the Air Force focal point for software, cloud, and cybersecurity related impediments and enablers. This team includes Platform One and Cloud One and is supported by 17 software factories, of which you can see on the slides here what that is. So now there's the 17 factories, there's the 3 software engineering groups, the 2 enterprise services spread across the United States. Of those 17 software factories, Kessel Run is one of them. And that's the one within the Lifecycle Management Center's Digital Directorate. And they're the ones working to cut 62 years from existing service acquisition schedules, especially in the world of software development. So why are we bringing this up? Because with these seats being vacant, that's going to impact some of the initiatives. Now, some other of those components of the directorate that we have here that impact procurement and acquisition specifically is the Secretary for Contracting. They're the ones that oversee those 8,000 contracting professionals that execute programs worth more than $65 billion annually. We also have the Scientific Advisory Board. This is important because they do the in-depth reviews of the science and technology programs for the Air Force Research Laboratory, of which AFWorks is a technology directorate. And the chief commercialization officer serves as the director of AFWorks and is responsible for the execution of $1.3 billion per year. So that's where you'd see things like SIBRs and SITRs. Then we have all of these other components too. I want to make sure that we're mindful of time, but it's things like logistics and product support, information dominance, global power, global reach, science, technology, and engineering, and acquisition and integration. So this is yours for the reading. But instead of going into that, what I know you all really want to know is about how they spend, how much they spend, and where they're spending it. So I'm going to pass it over to Amber.
Sit down and take a breath.
Oh, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about spending trends. And because of what we covered, right, we want to make sure that this is IT focused mainly for the sake of time and for everyone's sanity. But in 2022, Air Force awarded around $85.3 billion to over 3.5 thousand government contractors. And we double checked that number a few different times because we were like, wow, that's a really big number of contractors. And that is exactly what we're getting back out of there. But what's been interesting about looking at Air Force spending trends over time is the averages. And I know that it was discussed prior, right, was about the funding and the investment of the modernization. And we're going to really see that in the numbers here. Because over the past decade, Air Force spending has only increased by 2% in obligations year over year. And that's not even taking into consideration inflation, right? So that number probably is even going to further decrease or get to probably 0% if we were to take that in there. But moving on to the next slide, looking at what in IT space, what does this look like? So one of the most interesting things that we found when looking at Air Force IT spending trends, and something that we want everyone here to take out of this lesson for your SAM profile, for your capabilities and marketing, when you're searching for opportunities, is that between fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 22, Air Force used more than 150 different types of product service codes to purchase IT products and services. That means that when you are looking for requirements, opportunities, spending, right, there are over 150 different PSE codes for you to log in and look at. So don't just focus on, one or two. And what we have listed here, which you guys will get in the presentation, is just the top 10, right? So looking at that, and then what does the Air Force, and how does the Air Force buy, awarded by other agencies? As you can see, a majority is DoD, serving as the contracting agency, with GSA doing about 7% of the spending, which I know kind of seems a little crazy, especially with FedSim and OASIS, but you can see that Air Force still does a lot of their own procurement and acquisition.
Yeah. That's really important when it comes to doing things like customer outreach.
Absolutely. So looking at SBIRs and SITRs, so we talked about this a little bit. Just a few years ago, the SBIR and SITR opportunity and program moved under AFWorks. If you're not familiar with AFWorks, definitely give them a look. They are really proactive in the community. It's a great organization that Air Force has stood up. But over the past 30 years, again, a very interesting trend that we've seen about modernization and investment into the Air Force, especially. The SBIR and SITR program has only seen about on average 11 to 10% growth year over year in awards and in vendors, but a more massive growth in obligations. So that's telling us, right, the money that's being poured into these programs have been going up, but so much as the number of awards and the awardees have stayed kind of stagnant over the years and much lower. So more money, but not more vendors being brought in, at the same amount of scale. So bigger pile, still smaller pond.
And that could be attributed to the fact that people might not know where to find SBIRs and SITRs, or might be relying
That's a discussion for another day.
on things like sam.gov, but just making sure that you're actually logged in and signed up to receive the invites and the emails to bid on these is really important as a contractor.
Absolutely. And included in that pipeline that we're going to be sending out to everyone that did not leave and took a picture. We're going to be covering actually a SBIR that was put out the other day by Air Force through grants.gov that did not pop up on SAM. So that will be included in that pipeline. So looking at the vendors, we always like to point out people, because we know you guys come here also for teaming and introductions. So we like to call out the top vendors. So if you're looking for a teaming partner or looking to be a small business, we always like to pull this out for you guys. What's included in the top graph is your IT vendors, your top IT vendors. And included in the bottom of the two boxes are just your top vendors overall. But what we wanted to highlight was some very recent Air Force IT awards that were made. One to Blue Ivy Partners for $149 million for licensing. One to Alon Science and Tech Corp for $71 million for program management. And then ITSC Secure Solutions for $450 million in Huntsville. Are any of them here? Raise your hand. Some subs want to say congrats.
Yeah.
No,
Now you have
they're
some
hiding.
outreach. Yeah.
But now you know some people that are definitely ramping up on some requirements for outreach. Also, it wouldn't be a GovCon, presentation, especially at Washington Technology with Ross, if we didn't touch on some certain recent M&A transactions within the Air Force world. 2021 was a massive year, especially for Air Force vendors in activity for as far as M&A services go. You can see a lot of the movement there, but it's very healthy. It's been a little bit slower since 2021, but definitely growing. But that was a massive year for vendors. So I know we're going to hear from this Office of Small Business Program, so we didn't want to touch on small business spending too much. We didn't want to steal that thunder. But looking at the FY23 DoD prime contracting small business goals, you can get an idea there. But looking at also the Air Force FY22 contract obligations by set-aside type. SDBs are the largest vendors that are getting that type of award besides just small businesses. But something very interesting that we've picked up on is that IT awards made to small businesses in the Air Force community have declined sharply over the last 2 fiscal years, dropping more than 60% in FY21 and another 30% in FY22. If we had a little bit more time to research that, I would love to give everyone our thoughts on that, but don't have that quite yet on what's happening there, right? But we did also include the top small business IT vendors within the Air Force space. So if you're a large looking for a small business partner, there you go. So just touching on a few more relevant policy trends as well. As was mentioned earlier, right, there's been a few strategy documents that have been dropped for comment. We definitely recommend everyone giving that a look at. But DoD maintains a beautiful cyber policy chart here that you can also print and put behind your desk. It was just updated in February of 2023. But something that we wanted to call out as we're talking about small businesses is very recently the DoD put out a memo that is directly relevant to Air Force that they're going to start utilizing category management practices more when it comes to small business goaling, which could mean a few different things, but more spending going to those best-in-class contracts possibly. So seeing that GSA pie grow a little bit more, or possibly also more consolidation, which could lead to a sharper decline also in small business utilization. TBD. So last but not least, we want to tie this up with the strategy going forward. Where is the Air Force going? We definitely recommend checking out those POAMs and looking at those strategy documents that were referenced, but looking also at the 6 core lines of effort that have come out, as well as FY23 omnibus allocations for $60 billion for operations and maintenance, right, for IT programs, $64 million for cybersecurity activities, and $3.6 billion for space vehicles, terminals, and things like that. But something that we definitely want to touch on that I know was referenced up here a little bit about the workforce that we found in a report that we thought was very interesting was that Air Force is facing a massive challenge when it comes to the IT management role and age. So nearly 50% of the IT management workforce within the Air Force are aged 50 and plus, right? So that might mean that a lot coming up on retirement, right? So that is looking like a robust opportunity for the vendors in this community to help support, as was referenced earlier. So we thought that really did coincide with the data that we were seeing.
All right, so that is our presentation, and we made it on time. I'm really proud
You're
of
welcome,
us
Nick.
because we had a lot of information. So here is that QR code again. Again, when you have this, you sign up with the QR code, we'll send you the slides. This is just making it simpler than you guys reaching out individually. And you'll also, on Monday, get a pipeline made from us on 5 upcoming opportunities for Air Force in IT and our thoughts on each of them.
Thank you. You want to leave that up?
Yeah, I'll leave that up. Thank you.
Stay up there.
We're staying up here.
Are we good?
Ross
in there?
says he has questions. Do we have questions?
I have questions, and I would like the clicker, please.
Huh? Oh, the QR. You made it go away.
Yes,
There you go.
I will show the QR code in a minute. Second.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Look at that slide. I think this is a record for most amount of text I have ever seen in a
Right, it's an
PowerPoint
image.
presentation.
I don't know if anyone follows DoD charts on Twitter if you're still on that platform, but it is hilarious. It has all kinds of graphics.
Who's seen the JADC2 slide from the Defense Department? You have. I thought that was complicated, but look at that. Now I will show the QR code. But I just wanted to show that slide for effect.
I feel bad for whoever worked on that.
Quickly remind us what the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Biz Tech Transfer programs are.
SIBRs and sitters.
Sippers and
Yeah,
sitters.
so it's a different type of funding. They're typically for things like research and development, prototyping. It comes from a different pool of money in the budget, and they typically circumvent a lot of the FAR requirements that a typical proposal would require. Now, that being said, we've done our fair share of SIBR and sitter proposals. I don't think they're any less complicated. I think they're just as cumbersome. It's just a different sort of mentality and the sort of information that you put forth, like commercialization, reporting, and plans. You typically cost sharing. You typically need to have like somebody on the Air Force side to sponsor you in saying that yes, this is something that you can do. But there's some really great opportunities, and a lot of people think that maybe they're small, and some of them are. Some of them do start like capping at 50,000, but some can get to phase 2 at 400,000. Some can get upwards of $1 million. So.
Yeah, there's in my opinion kind of there's the goal of what they were set out to do, which was to help small businesses work with the government and especially in defense faster by breaking down a few more barriers for them to kind of get in quick. What really it helps, I think, the government do is get around some budgetary congressional requirements truthfully and get to the money faster, and helps them move fast, break things without it costing a lot of money, right? And that's what we ask for our government to do right now, especially in DoD space, is try new things. This is the way that they're trying new things.
Hugely for innovation and non-traditional contractors, but that's not to say that there's not a market for traditional contractors to enter it.
Yeah. What is a traditional contractor?
I don't know what a traditional contractor is anymore.
That will change the definition of traditional and non-traditional sometime. And then, what do they do and not do for companies? And sippers and sitters.
What do they not do for companies?
Right.
What do you mean?
What kind of a pathway can they provide to working for the government, and what pitfalls do you see companies
It's so,
run into?
the Pulse always talks about, yes, there's traditional ways that you can go through and obtain contracts and capture work, and you can go through the open source solicitations and bid on them. And so this is a way to sort of, like I said, circumvent the FAR. People use some of these smaller opportunities to get a foothold in with a customer agency that they might not have past performance with. So that's a good one. Kind of in the same vein, we always preach about grants, even though you're not a not-for-profit. There's plenty of for-profit grant opportunities with the government, even on the DoD side. And same things for things like Challenge. So going to challenge.gov and getting a small, quote unquote, it's not a contract per se, but it's work with that agency set that then you have as past performance.
Yeah, and it helps. What it does do, or if you're in the tech space and you're trying to build something, if you're looking for investment from the government to help you build these things, it does help you do that. There are some cost sharing initiatives, especially if you have a stakeholder that is working to champion you. What it doesn't do, right? What it does not do is help protect that. Sometimes there's a lot of gray area right now between IP and the DoD and that debate, right? And the commercialization of that, tech transfers, all of that debate. So what it doesn't do is protect you fully from, the government's not just going to fund your IT and be like, here, you have it now. That's not the way that's going to work. And I know there's a massive debate right now going on in academia and industry, in the legal world, right, of what does that mean and how does that look. And so I think that, we could talk all day about what sippers and sitters are supposed to be versus what they are, right? But we can save that for another presentation.
A very, very another presentation. Data rights, intellectual property. Let's just shelve that. So, category management as a means for the Defense Department to reach its small business goals. In DoD tradition, it appears that they're just going down their own path compared to other agencies. Where does that go from here? And for the companies in the audience that have one of the quote unquote best in class vehicles, what does it mean for me?
Well, Oasis Plus, right, is what that means for everyone. I mean, the Air Force uses Oasis. They're one of the biggest users of Oasis. So Oasis Plus just means that it's a requirement for possibly everyone in this room, right? But as we showed on the chart, Air Force does do a lot of its own contracting still, and will continue to do so. I don't foresee that really going away. They have a pretty proactive acquisition strategy that's really empowered through these software factories, empowered through, things like AFWorks and Kessel Run and these data centers. And so it's a different kind of world out in the Air Force when it comes to acquisition, but they do use things, for like FedSim, and they do use Oasis Plus. So I do foresee, possibly Rio also being a usage vehicle for the Air Force coming out through GSA, but that hasn't been named a BIC yet, right? So I do foresee that, things like NASA SOUP and the follow-on being a usage. I don't foresee it really, though, growing, if we're talking Air Force specifically, more than it has been now.
I mean, that would be a pretty significant swing, because we said that 7% was, acquired through GSA.
Yeah.
That's a small percentage.
And it's still very large. There's still a lot
the
of
dollar
money.
values.
Yeah, the
yes.
dollar values. But as far as the usage goes, I think Air Force would have to take a pretty massive hit in their procurement and acquisition staff and strategy and workforce. That would mean them walking back a lot of good progress that they've made over the past few years.
And they don't want to do that.
I wouldn't want them to do that. Please don't do that.
She said it, not me. So, staying on the theme of small businesses and pathways to working with the Air Force, we do occasional surveys at our parent company, GovExec, which asks leaders in industry, what do you need? Survey after survey tells us that teaming and partnerships are their number one need, and it's not even close. So what pathways do small businesses have to get on the radar screens and attention of some of the large vendors that you had on the screen midway through the presentation?
I mean, it's all sort of the same best practices. I don't think there's anything too vastly different about this agency versus any of the other ones, which is just making sure that you can showcase your value and your worth, do things like bring personnel, the opportunities to them, even methods by which to get contracts acquired. Even so much as saying, hey, I can do proposal support. This is all the things that we do to prove that we're a good subcontractor.
Yeah, and I would say as far as getting introductions or even growing relationships as someone looking to team or to partner or looking for different avenues outside of larger conferences is things like OTA consortiums, right? Like that's a big area for the Air Force right now. Right, wrong, indifferent. We like it. We love it. We hate it. It doesn't matter. That's a big area for them right now. Going to AFWorks events, they host a lot of those things. The software factories also host a lot of open houses and host a lot of vendor meet and greets and have a lot of informal things. They kind of operate as their own little incubator. So if you go to any of their websites, check them out. There are events there all the time. And a majority of the people that attend those are vendors that are currently supporting that type of entity, right? That enclave. So that is a great place to meet them, meet the niche vendors that you're looking to get into, is kind of attending those types of more those incubator events that Air Force hosts.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, we talk about relationships all the time, right? Relationship management, getting in front of the customer. And so to show your value, to bring one of those relationships, especially for Air Force, is really important. Just thinking about AFWorks and the SIBRs and how sometimes the requirement is to literally have an Air Force sponsor before you're even allowed to bid.
Yeah.
The large vendors make that introduction on your behalf, basically, many of the times for small businesses.
Right? But you definitely can. If you're a small business and you go to one of these smaller software factories or these, industry days, you can also get that introduction. Pitching. They have innovation pitch days all the time. I believe there is actually an Air Force industry week coming up very soon. If you are part of the Pulse in our membership, you will see a link to that event on our platform. But there's a lot of events where you can still go in, and if you are pitching, especially your tech, getting in there and being able to make an introduction.
As long as you've done your homework.
Yes.
All right. So I was writing down my homework. So keep your SAM info up to date when SAM.gov
When it's
works.
working.
When it works.
Yes.
Anybody have problems yesterday with SAM.gov?
We're having problems
Right
this
now,
morning.
404 errors.
100% of hands should have gone up, but I saw some nods, so we'll accept that. Keep your PSC codes up to date. Workforce challenges, staffing opportunities.
Absolutely.
Explain the opportunity there.
I mean, it was brought up right by the WCIO that was up here. He talked about it, that they are looking to outsource a lot of those IT requirements and needs, and it's going to keep continuing that way. mainly because, as he said, they're having workforce that could be doing other things. And also, as we see in the data, there's workforce that is looking to approach the retirement age as well. So there is from help desk requirements to helping build modernization efforts and manage those things. All of those requirements are going to keep getting bigger in those types of personnel needs because of the workforce issues that Air Force might be facing in the IT world.
Lightning round, one question. What do you want to hear from our next speaker?
Oh, man.
You got to tell us this in advance so we can think of really thoughtful questions and not just like we've talked about this at length.
When is the Air Force website getting updated? I mean that. Because there's a lot of good information out there that we had to go searching for, and it's disparate, right? It would be, and I know that everyone is aware of that. I would love to know when is the Office of Small Business Programs page on Air Force getting updated, and if it's not, let's talk. Love to give you some recommendations.
I had to bake at least one surprise question in there. Forgive me.
Do you have anything?
No, because now Amber's in trouble. So that's all we needed.
Well, that may be the first question. I can't guarantee it, but Nick, come on back up here and we'll
Thank
transition to
you.
the next session.